this is Jessica with Dining Traveler, and I'm here at La Famosa, the new Puerto Rican restaurant at Navy Yard, and I'm with the owner, Joancarlo Parkhurst. First of all, thank you so much for having us here, and this is, as you see, we have a little social distancing situation going here for the record. And you recently opened, and you're bringing a little taste of Puerto Rico, which not that I'm biased, but I am, but I love it. What inspired you to bring this here to DC?
I think, living in the DC area for almost a little bit over 20 years now, just craving the food of home and limited options, some great places, but typically you have to drive kind of far or go to Virginia or hunt down a food truck, and that's it. And then, as I started kind of going over an idea with my business partner, I said, why not? Let's do it. There's definitely a need and desire, and it's something that I'm passionate about. Yeah. So it was kind of a no-brainer in that regard.
And I love that the menu is like, I come here and it reminds me actually of one of my favorite places in Puerto Rico, Casalta. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but just like in terms of the menu, because, you have the plato fuerte, you have the, el chillo frito, tienes este mofongo, but you also have one of my favorite things, quesitos, mallorcas, and what made you go with a menu like that?
Yeah, you're 100% spot on. So. Yeah. In Puerto Rico, we have panaderias everywhere, as you know, but they're much more than just bakeries typically. So they offer everything from pastries to breakfast to then composed lunches and dinners, full spirits and wines.
Of course.
Casalta is one of my favorites. La España, Los Sidrines, to name a few in the metro area. And they really work kind of like that catalyst and inspiration for at least a lot of how our menu was built out, and even so some of our interior design aspects, in particular how the menu boards read and things of that nature, were really inspired by that panaderia experience in Puerto Rico.
And you were born in, either you were born in New York and raised in Puerto Rico or vice versa?
Vice versa.
Yeah.
So I was born in Santurce at Doctor's Hospital. Moved to New York when I was 6, spent all my summers and Christmas breaks in Puerto Rico, and then moved back as an adult. And then 20 years ago got transferred back here to the DC market. And
I haven't left. I was born in New York, but then I moved when I was 5 years old to Puerto Rico, so opposite, but it's the best of the both worlds.
It is, you see everything, right?
Growing up, I hated it, but now I'm like, it all makes sense because I feel like I can go from one place to the other, and it's kind of seamless.
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed my time in New York, obviously, because not that I had a choice as a kid, but getting to try places like La Caridad and La Brisas and going to Washington Heights and just eating all kinds of different food, and then always finding that similarity yet contrast between what was in the island, I think really kind of, gave me a pretty well-rounded understanding of what La Comida Criolla is, or what it means to people, and then kind of the emotion that it can kind of pull out of you.
And you talk about the emotion, and I feel like now when I moved to this area like 20 years ago till now, and you see how the Puerto Rican diaspora has grown here. Earlier you were saying how the demand was too much, like when you guys opened.
Yeah. Well, first of all, we're terribly just super humbled by it. The goal was always to just be kind of a little local neighborhood spot, and I apologize because we never meant it to have long lines, and it's a small kitchen, and again, I don't want to make excuses. I appreciate everything that's happened and as much interest as we've had, but we've actually kind of decided to kind of slow it down a little bit so we can focus on quality and getting it dialed in and making sure that we're doing things right, because that means a lot. I'd rather put that experience in the forefront right now. It has been challenging. I mean, I'm a Puerto Rican in the area, you're a Puerto Rican in the area. There's I think in the DMV, well over 350,000 Puerto Ricans.
Really? I didn't know that many.
I was just speaking to one of my reps, who's a Latin provider, and he actually had hard stats on it.
Oh, wow.
And it blew my mind.
Yeah, and they're like all spread out because, for those who, if you're in DC, DC, Maryland, Virginia. Yeah. But for those, we have a lot of people that watch from Puerto Rico. Like, this area is huge. So, you can go out to Woodbridge, which is like 40 minutes away without traffic, or, and have plenty of Puerto Ricans around.
Again, super humble. We've had people coming from Pennsylvania, Eldersburg, Maryland, Centerville, Laytonville, like Cockeysville, like super far, like people driving literally hours. And that's why it's again, very humbling and very appreciative, but We were not ready for that level of response.
But that's great.
It is.
And you were saying, like, traditional food and evokes an emotion, and I think that these days people are looking for that connection, more than ever, even during these challenging times for the restaurant industry. And I also find that in DC, the quantity and quality of the Latin food has increased. And where do you see Latino food in general? And I've asked this to everybody, like I asked this to Cristina from Soul Barbacoa and Enrique Limardo, and I'm always very interested to see their responses.
What I think is really cool is that when I first moved to the area, it was very homogenized, right? We were all kind of put into one box.
Yeah.
And you go to a lot of restaurants that were like three things in one, like El Salvador and Mexican, Nicaraguans. And I think that finally more and more chefs and people are letting their own cuisine from their own regions really speak for themselves. And I think that not only for the diaspora, but also for the American consumer and quote unquote the more Anglo palate, they're really seeking those authentic experiences out. So you're absolutely right. There's great Peruvian food now. There's, fantastic options. The Spanish have always represented themselves well in the DC market for whatever reason. But I think now we're going to see a lot more of true regional cuisine, right? Just because we share a common language doesn't mean that we're all the same, and it doesn't mean that our cuisine is all the same.
And I think we don't eat spicy food, they're like, oh, you're Puerto Rican, you must like spicy food, and I'm like, I do, but not because I'm Puerto Rican.
Yeah. The other day, someone ordered ensalada mariscos, and the server comes back and goes, "Chef, the ceviche is cooked." and shame on me because we're a vegetarian piece. Obviously, it's not ceviche, but yeah, it's cooked, and we eat our food differently, and we don't eat super spicy. Do I take a couple of creative licenses with the cuisine, like with the snapper? Sure. But yeah, I really want it to be as true as possible with, hopefully a little riff on it every once in a while.
And I know that being a chef a lot is like being a parent. You can't pick favorites when it comes to the cuisine, but if somebody does come from to La Famosa and they're like, it's Friday night, like I just want to treat myself to something good, what would you recommend?
You want to eat like authentic stuff, get the chillo frito, like
that was my favorite when I came.
It's you find, if you're on the beach, if you're like in any fly shack, whether you're in, in Piñones or what have you, these are really common things you're gonna find. When we get the bacalaíto to start working again within the frame of our kitchen, those are really classic things. Look for the mofongo. Everyone said, "Are you gonna have mofongo, chef?" I said, actually, in the beginning, I said no, because I feel like it just defines us, right? And then what's really curious is that you're always gonna have this kind of back and forth with the guests, like, oh, that's not how my grandma makes it. Or this is how my grandma makes it, or this is my, and that's what's even cooler about our cuisine, that even within Puerto Rico, if you're on the northwest side and then you go in the southern part of the island, there are going to be variations within the cuisine itself. And I think it's fun, and I think that dialogue and that openness, and I'm completely open to feedback, and again, I think that Latin cuisine in this area will only continue to grow, and I think that it's going to become just much more truer to kind of the cultural identity of the particular cooks putting their hands on it. And I think that they're going to go for less of that kind of blanket approach to catch everyone and really let that cuisine shine.
And I know that, this can be also a gateway to Puerto Rico for many people who are not Puerto Rican that are curious about the culture. And, now we're everywhere, con Bad Bunny, and as this being a gateway, and if somebody was to ask you, if I go to Puerto Rico tomorrow, COVID aside and all the other regulations, like where would you recommend 3 places that they cannot miss when they go to Puerto Rico?
100%. So the first thing you do when you land is go to Piñones. Like just go, get in your car, rent it, take an Uber, and just eat your way through like all the fly shacks, and eat the alcapurrias and the bacalaitos and everything else. So that's like my first go-to stop if you're landing during the day. Next place you must go within the metro area is La Placita del Mercado in Santurce.
Love that place.
Fantastic restaurants, incredible seafood spot called La Tasca del Pescador. It's been around, I've been dining there since my grandfather, took me there as a kid. Incredible food, great ambiance, little satellite bars everywhere, fresh food market during the day. Must go. And then again, if I'm gonna keep you in the metro area, if you don't have too much time, go to La Casita Blanca. Have you been to this? So again, it's strictly lunch, it's home cooking, it's a little hard to get into just because they have limited hours and it's kind of just first come, first served. But again, you want to eat arrabichuela the right way, a good bistec encebollado, and just really humble food. That's where you go because they do it super well.
And now that you said that, I'm getting hungry. So we are gonna conclude this interview so I can now have lunch. And thank you so much, Joancarlo. And this is La Famosa. It's at the Navy Yard here in DC, and you guys are open for breakfast.
We will be open eventually for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Due to the high demand, we're currently still offering just breakfast service and dinner service starting at 5 p.m. 7 days a week.
Okay.
And hopefully for the next few weeks, we'll roll out lunch for you all as well.
Okay, so you go and have your cafecito, your quesito, relax, and have a little taste of Puerto Rico here in Washington, D.C.
And get your work done on the Wi-Fi too.
Yes. Oh, sign me up.
Yeah. All right, mi gente.